So I heard JT did some stuff with Blanchard.
I know that they're doing the top 100 Transformers characters, all generations, which I'm like, I'm not sure how you do that because some versions of the characters have multiple different incarnations, so you can't even just whittle it down to like G1. Like there's several different versions of the G1 characters.
I imagine 25% of the list is Optimus Prime.
I'm sure Optimus Prime is going to be number one.
Oh, Jesus Christ, yes. Or I could actually see Blanchard making an argument with Rodimus.
He's like fully on board that Rodimus is the greatest character. I'm like, why do you throw down these gauntlets? Like, you know you're wrong. So I sent in like this rant about, because I'm not actually on that show, so I was just like, hey, if you guys want to play this, go ahead. But I didn't send it to Blanchard, I sent it to one of the other guys. And it was basically like 2 minutes of me going off on how stupid Rodimus is, how he basically gave up the Matrix the first chance he got, and when the Spore Plague broke out, he immediately demanded that Optimus Prime be resurrected, and you know his vehicle mode is stupid. It looks like a U-Haul truck. You know, what the hell is that?
It's a Winnebago dump truck.
The wheels don't even make sense. How does that thing even turn?
See, I love the fact that in the old show, we did like a 10-minute discussion. Is it a Winnebago or a dump truck?
When we had people who worked on the show, I would ask them. It's such a terrible design. It's like the Homer. You know, it's like a car made by someone who doesn't understand how cars work. Like, this is gonna be so cool.
Season 2?
I think so.
It was a Danny DeVito.
Yeah, the Danny DeVito episode. Oh brother, where art thou, or something. The title was something like that. Oh my god, that was a great episode. And I love the it's not really an angry face, but it's like the stern face of Homer as he's pointing at the car. He's like, no, do it this way.
Yeah, so he goes on the sketchboard, he draws something with a bubble.
And it's like the dumbest drawing.
What I love is there's this great personal moment where everyone else is asleep except for Homer and Bart driving back home, and Bart says to Homer, "Dad, I thought your car actually looked cool." It's sort of like one of those little heartstring moments that the first couple seasons of Simpsons had.
But in a way, it was also kind of a dig because it's the kind of car design that only a child would appreciate.
Yes, but this is back when Bart was extremely rude to his dad, so it's really one of those touching moments where it's like, oh, he likes his dad.
Yeah. Well, there was some subtlety with Krusty, because Krusty looks a lot like Homer, and I know the original pitch. Yeah, the original pitch was that he was Homer, but like he saw Krusty as his hero, and he was kind of subconsciously seeing his dad in Krusty.
Was there actually any writers in the writers' room when they started that were from Chicago? Because I checked, and I actually don't think any of the original writers said anything about Bozo being an inspiration for Krusty.
Dan Castellaneta said that the voice was based on Bob Bell.
Mm.
And I do believe him. I think he did grow up in Chicago. And Bozo did sound like that. So I believe him.
Okay. Do you believe that Harry Shearer actually got to see The Day the Clown Cried?
Yeah. I don't see why he'd lie about that. Makes sense.
We still need to find that copy.
Oh God, I need to see that film. I mean, there was that assembly version that somebody kind of constructed together, and they somehow wrangled together a lot of footage from the movie, albeit it was under an hour, but still, it was like holy shit, this is awful. Like, why would you make this?
And then Matt Pat did his video, How to Hack the Oscars. And he basically details how to make a movie. He says you have to make it in World War II. You have to have it about an entertainer. The entertainer has to be the hero. Mm-hmm. And you have to do something about concentration camps. And it's like, you just made the Day the Clown Cried.
Yes. Oh, I gotta see that movie.
It's
everybody. It's another installment of the Gaming Hipster podcast. It's been a couple months. I took a couple months off because, well, just felt like it. And I've been doing a lot of stuff on Twitch. I recorded like 2 games back to back, and that's those are being put up on my YouTube channel at the moment. So if you want to see what I've been up to, head on over there. I'll put a link in the show post. But anyway, today we're gonna talk about books.
Yes.
Great topic for the return show. Ben's here with me,
Yes, I am.
and we're going to talk about Doom, and then we're going to talk about Smoke and Mirrors.
Oh.
Let's get Doom out of the way, just because it's got the most funny, but it's also the one where I really don't know what to say because it's so what the fuck.
It's awful. It is awful. Let me take you back to the past. It was, what was it, 90... what was it? I was in middle school.
Yeah, it was like 92 or something.
And I was in a, what was the name of the books? It was like Walden Books.
Mm-hmm.
Walden Books. And I was looking at the novels, and I saw Doom. I'm like, what? There's a Doom novel? Oh boy, I've got to buy it. So I took out my saved up money and bought this book. And I read it, and it was really weird. It was really weird. The book was burned in my head, and what's really more weird about it is that it's not just one book. It's 4 books. 4 books. Knee Deep in the Dead, Hell on Earth, Inferno Sky, and Endgame are the 4 books. And I have a theory that this writer came in being told, okay, here's this video game, and here's a free copy of the video game. Play through the video game and write a book. And then he's like, okay, but I have a contract for like four bucks. So he's like, all right, do what you want. And this writer decided he was the next incarnation of L. Ron Hubbard or Robert Heinlein or some shit, because the books after book 1 go way the fuck out there. Way the fuck out there. Neil has only read the first book, so you are lucky, Neil. You have not seen the Mormon resistance against the demons. You haven't seen the IRS carrier attack fleet. You have not seen Jesus Christ. You haven't seen the 2 alien races warring over humanity using the demons as a proxy called the Claves and the Freds. And have you not seen the new alien that comes in halfway through the war called the Newbies?
I'm just kind of I don't even know what to say about any of that. I'm still kind of blown away by the first book because, it starts off fine. It starts off, setting things up. It's like, okay, he's a Marine. He's a Space Marine. He's in a Navy unit, or not a Marine unit, and he's on
Phobos.
Phobos, and it sets up. It outlines like who the other characters are, although none of them last very long except for Arlene.
Oh God!
And so immediately around like chapter 5 or 6, like shit starts going to hell. Literally, like all the other characters become zombies, and he's got to shoot all of his buddies, and he starts running into enemies from the game, and after a while, you're reading it and you're like, wait a minute, this writer is just describing the levels.
Yeah, it's accurate detail, no less.
Yeah, now it's been a long time since I played Doom, and I've never really been a Doom fan, but like I still remember some of the levels, and I'm like, this guy's describing the first stage in the game. I think he like actually describes like the zigzag that's in the floor where it's like the green fluid all around.
Yes.
He describes that part, and he describes like the pool that's outside in the one area, and I'm like, he's just walking through the level.
Yes.
It's like he's playing the game and like writing it down and playing a little more and writing it down, and that was his entire method of writing the book. And what's even more fucked up is that he starts getting into gameplay. Like he discovers that if he shoots a barrel, there's these stupid like, I don't know what's in the barrels, but if you shoot one, it explodes. And if there's other barrels nearby, it'll like cause a chain reaction, and you can kill a bunch of enemies doing that. And he describes that, and he mentions it later to Arlene as the barrel trick. and they do it again, and it's so ridiculous. And they're talking about the key cards and how monotonous it is to keep having to find the keys so they can open doors. I think they find every single key card that's in the goddamn game.
That's all. It takes exactly 6 rockets to defeat a Baron of Hell.
Yeah, they did that.
Uh,
There's a scene in the book where where they like sit down and they name the enemies that are in the game. We should call these imps.
and well, they don't call the cacodemons. They call them
Pumpkins.
yes. And the funniest thing about the pumpkins is when the pumpkins blow up, Arlene shouts something smashing pumpkin something something, and that goes into an old Doom cheat code. Was IDSPISPOPD, which was the no clip in Doom 1. Which is
This
kind
is a
of
real book.
yes,
Yeah.
this is a real book. It's a what I find funny is when I described this book to Neil, I said this. I said it's like you go through 5 pages of the main character, Flynn Taggart, Corporal Flynn Taggart of the United States Marine Corps, uh, walking through the game in accurate detail down to where the item drops are. And then suddenly Flynn in an internal monologue describes Arlene's breasts.
Yeah. Because he spends half the book trying to find Arlene.
Yes.
And every now and then he'd have to like stop and like fantasize about Arlene and do whatever he's doing
Yes.
while he's thinking about her.
Yes. It's a
He gets
weird.
into detail.
Yeah, he does. It's a fucking weird book. This is one of the weirdest books ever. Not it's even weird for like a video game novelization. And there are weird video game novelizations. This is a weird book. And the first one at least could be like treated as a quasi walkthrough.
Yeah, yeah. If you're stuck, you can probably just read this book and it'll tell you how to get through it.
And I can't believe we're going to bring this up, but I will because this is one of the weirdest things to me. So you know about the Columbine shooters, right?
Yes.
All right. One of the Columbine shooters actually nicknamed his shotgun Arlene.
Oh my god.
Yes, that's right, Neil. Like Catcher in the Rye was banned for how many years?
Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ.
Okay, that was bad of me. I admit it, but yes, the Columbine shooters were fans of these 4 novels.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway. Again, I don't know what else to say about it. It's just so weird.
They describe how the respawning enemies work. And if you like pick Nightmare on Doom or Ultra Nightmare, whatever it is, like the enemies respawn after like 2 minutes or some shit.
That's right.
And they describe how that works in the book because there's like a level in like the second episode of Doom. There's a level in the game where there's like these mashers, and there's nothing in the mashers, but in the book it's like, oh, this masher has bone, this masher has sinew, this masher has muscle. It's like, oh, they're rebuilding the demons, so there's always going to be demons. So it's really weird the way that they describe the game mechanics like that. They do describe all the game mechanics. They describe how the radiation suits work in the game as well in the book.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, it's only good for a couple minutes because it just starts eating away and you have to take it off. Oh, gee, that's convenient. And
oh god.
and what is it? It's a big freaking gun.
That's right. He got the BFG toward the end.
Yes. Now,
go ahead.
Neil, you a couple of weeks ago did like this weird Mario internal soliloquy, and that was an illustration of how this book is, where Mario defeats one of the Koopas posed as Bowser in Mario.
Yeah,
1.
and I think it was not in a recording. It was like in Kitty Hawk's chat room or something, and I do not remember.
Yes,
what it was. I presume it was something like I jumped over the pit of lava, and ahead of me was Bowser. Luckily, I had the fire flower. I shot him 5 times, but alas, it was just a Goomba. And then I moved forward past the axe, and instead of the princess, there was a toad. He told me the princess was in another castle. I moved on. That's basically how this book is written.
Then, you know, every 5 pages, Mario would describe Peach's breasts.
Yeah. This book was so boring, though. Like, let me tell you how boring this was. I got a text to speech reader, and I couldn't take it anymore. I just plugged the PDF into it. I had the computer read it for me. I'm like, I can't read this anymore. I'm just gonna go lay down and just listen. It was a slog because I would start reading, have to take a break for a couple weeks, and I'd be like, God damn it, I don't remember anything. I'd start over. I'd be like, oh God, I gotta stop again. And it was just this cycle of stupidity. And I just eventually just said, I'm gonna get Speechify and have it read it for me because I can't take this.
Now, there's one weird sequence in the book that I distinctly remember from the first book. And I'm going to try to describe it the best as I can remember it. I haven't read this book in years. Neil just read or had the book read to him. So there's this weird sequence where Flynn Taggart has a dream, and it's a nightmare where his dead grandfather is shouting at him, "Don't let him rework me, Finney! Don't let him rework me, Finney!" Because apparently he thought that the zombies are corpses that are reworked or some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this because it actually had like the really bad like Scottish accent like written in phonetically in the book.
Oh my God.
Do you remember this or
Vaguely.
yes? It's I can't stress how weird this book is. But at the same time, this is the least weird of the 4 Doom books.
Oh.
Like okay, I will not subject Neil to any of the future Doom books unless he really wants to.
Well, I've made a discovery that on YouTube there is a guy who did audiobook versions of the books.
Okay.
I don't know if he did all 4, but he did the first one and the second one. I'm like, oh no.
Does he like do voices and shit?
He kind of did the voices in the way that I just did it for the Mario one.
Okay. Well, second book, they Flynn and Arlene land on Earth in Salt Lake City, which it turns out is the last stronghold of humanity against the demons. And they meet up with a fat Mormon sniper named Albert and a computer tech whiz teenage girl named Jill. And their job is to stop the demons from doing something with a communication tower. And if you've ever played Doom 2, first of all, Doom doesn't really have a plot. Was it
No, it
John
doesn't.
Carmack or John Romero who gave the famous plot is like porn speech?
I vaguely remember something like this.
Where I'm going to say it's Carmack because it sounds more like something Carmack would say is like having a plot in a video game is like having a plot in a porno. You know you need to have it, but it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So the first Doom game, no real plot, right? Other than like you beat the level and you get like this end game screen where it says, you climb down from hell and find your dead rabbit or some shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the graphic of the rabbit's head.
And that was mainly a joke. That was mainly like, oh, we have to have a plot. Why is the Marine like really mad at the demons? Oh, they killed his bunny. Like that's obviously a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was obvious. Like if you actually care about the plot of Doom, he's mad that they killed his buddy. Go fuck yourself. But
Almost sounds like a parody of like the plot to Blaster Master,
yes.
where your frog jumps down a hole that's right next to a radioactive something, and it causes the frog to grow, and you go after him, and there just happens to be a tank in the hole. It like makes no goddamn sense, but like it's just to get the game going.
Yeah. And Doom 2 actually had a little bit more of a plot because like after you finish like several levels, you'll have like one of those text screens where it says, the last of humanity has been set on board ships and you have to clear the way for them to get through. It's like, okay, that's a little too much detail for Doom, but I'll give you a pass because it's not horrible. You can just skip through that screen and just go on killing demons. So the Doom 2 novel, Doom Hell on Earth, uh, has this whole plot about how most of the United States government surrendered the first day. And
Right.
it reveals that most of the U.S. government infrastructure actually has a lot of military branches into it, including the IRS carrier attack fleet. And the last stronghold of free humans are the Mormons that have like this tabernacle fortress in Salt Lake City. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are like the most violent, badass warriors fighting against the demons because apparently they object to every other war, but this one they're like, oh fuck, sign me up, give me some bombs, I'm gonna bomb those fuckers or some shit. Anyways,
Okay.
the Doom 2 book ends with them like going to Hawaii where there's another stronghold for humanity, and it's like, oh, we need to go to space because it finds out the demons aren't actually demons; they're genetically made monsters made by an alien race called the Freds. And the Freds basically watch TV and they're like, oh, humans are afraid of demons, so let's make genetic demons and send them over and they'll surrender because they're afraid of demons. But and the Freds look like really tall, spindly monsters with like elongated heads and gross teeth. And there's an ally race that contacts the humans like, we're your friends. We hate the Freds and we want to help you beat the Freds. And these aliens are called the Claves. And
Okay.
let me remember how fucking Flynn describes the Claves. The Claves are a binary species where you have there's two Claves are like a single entity in two bodies, like the Binars from that episode of Star Trek.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and they're described as really large blue ape-like beings with alley-oop faces
Alley oop faces.
from the
What does
old
that even mean?
from the old comic strip alley-oop.
Oh, okay. Alley oop faces. I gotta look this up. Alley oop. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what they're going for. That's a weird way of explaining it.
And the what else with the Claves? The Claves could not send actual forces to help the humans, so they sent items. So
Okay.
the orbs, the soul spheres, are Clave inventions sent to help the humans.
Oh my God, the soul spheres.
Yes.
You know, it took me a moment to figure out what the hell they were even describing. I'm like, blue spheres with faces in them. What the hell is he talking about? And then I looked it up. I'm like, oh God, those things.
The power up.
Yeah, the power up.
But anyways, so the Clave help help Arlene and Flynn and the other guys basically fight against the Freds, and they take over a Fred starship that's heading towards the Fred homeworld, and they have to like do the hypersleep bullshit, you know?
Mhm.
Like, oh, it's going to go on forever. We need to go in these hibernation chambers and wait for us to arrive. And then book four starts. Book four starts. It's hundreds of years in the future. Arlene, Flynn, and the two Claves. And oh, I didn't tell you what the two Claves' names are.
What are they?
Sears and Roebuck.
Why?
Because they give them weapons and items and stuff like that. Oh, Sears and Roebuck. You need some shotguns here. You need some soul spheres here. You know, Sears and Roebuck. They give them the
That's
items.
such a dated reference now. I mean, the
And
tower isn't even named Sears anymore.
anyways, it describes a moment when Arlene and Flynn were thought to be killed, and
Hmm.
Sears and Roebuck got like basically they did nothing throughout the whole books. They just sort of sit there and sort of like say talk in like a weird binary fashion where one person starts a sentence, the other one finishes it, and all this other bullshit. Just give
It's like
items.
Tomax and Zaymot.
Yeah, and then and then basically when Arlene and Flynn were thought to be dead, and we don't get to see it. Well, Arlene describes it later because she was almost dead. She got to see it. Uh, Sears and Roebuck start spinning around like crazy with their fists elongated out and start smashing like fucking Freds and shit. And
They're pinwheeling their arms.
spinning with their tiny little spindly legs and shit. It was hilarious. But anyways, they land on the Fred homeworld, and the Fred homeworld's empty. And they're like, "What the fuck's going on? I thought we had to fight all these Freds." And it's like, and they find this weird alien that looks like a gray alien smashed under the landing gear. Like, what the fuck is this thing? So they start healing it, and it turns out this thing is called a newbie.
Okay.
I swear to God, they call it a newbie in the damn book, Neil. And the newbie are a hyper evolving race that evolve by the minute. And the newbie, by the time they arrive to an Earth colony, newbie have evolved to the point where they get so tiny and so powerful that they are in every human's cells. So the newbies have taken over all humanity. But Flynn figures out a way to defeat the newbie. The one thing that newbies cannot stand and will perish under is if their host has religious faith.
Oh my God.
So Flynn is like talking to all these humans like, hey, let me tell you about this great thing called Christianity. And, that's not even the worst part about book 4. Halfway through book 4, like I said, Flynn and Arlene were thought to be dead because the newbies, like, put them in a chair and jam needles up their nose to, like, quote, take out their soul. But apparently it didn't work because they both had faith. But instead, they made copies of their soul, put them in a computer. So the computer has Flynn and Arlene running around the first game again in chapters parallel to the future chapters. Neil.
What?
Yes, but Flynn figures out early on it's like the Matrix and Neo, but this is like years before the Matrix. That because he knows he's in a simulation, he can like do things like a potted vase, a flower vase pop in the middle of a room, and then all of a sudden the demons are like, "Hey, what's that doing there?" And Flynn's like, "Oh, I have these powers, and you should listen to me." And the demons he gets like a fucking company of demons following him and him leading in like the first game again. Because he's using like Neo shit. And the one thing I remember is like all the demons have names. And there's a cacodemon they have on the team named Ollie Stratibus. If this sounds disjointed and weird the way I'm describing it, it's because the book is disjointed and weird. Okay?
This almost makes Children of the Jedi make sense. I can't. This is Doom. What the fuck?
Okay.
It must have just given these guys the license and didn't realize what they had done until the book started coming out, and then they're like, "Oh shit, we can't stop them." It's like Sony with Spider-Man. It's like, "Oh, damn it."
What was the worst part of what I described?
Just I don't know. I don't know how to quantify any of it. Just there's an alien race that is so small it can take over your body unless you have religion. It's how contrived.
Well, they've got faith of the heart.
Hmm.
It's been a long road getting from there to here.
Okay.
So, anyways, they arrive back on Earth, Arlene and Flynn with the clave and the converted new Christian humans, and they find that the only large structure left is the fucking tabernacle in Salt Lake City, where Jill, the computer hacker from the second book, and Albert, the fat Mormon sniper, cloned themselves and left them frozen for when Arlene and Flynn get back, so they can hang out again.
Oh my god! Did a 10-year-old write this?
That was the last chapter. They don't even wake up the clones, Neil. It's like, we found their clones. Book over.
I don't know what to say. This may be, I don't know if it's the worst book I ever read, but it's pretty close.
Oh, I've read a worse book recently, Neil.
Mm.
We're not going to talk about that one, though.
Okay. Well, we also read another book.
Yes.
Called Smoke and Mirrors.
Yes.
The rise and fall of a serial Antipreneur. Now, I had interviewed Mike James, the author of this book, several months ago, and I promised a review, and well, here we go. Actually, I don't know how well I can do the review, because as I was reading it, I was like, well, I saw all this happen in real time. So it's basically just a book just providing a summary of like things that happened over many, many weeks and months.
I'll give it credit that it has a lot of extra information I didn't know.
Yeah, it did have some information that I didn't know. Some stuff involving our buddy Ben Heck.
Yes.
But like everything else, it was just like well, I guess I can review it by saying that it was well written. Um, pretty thorough in the information department. I really didn't see anything that was omitted. Um,
No, but there definitely is, and let me just say it out here that Mike James doesn't make any attempt to claim to have uh, you know, a neutral journalistic stance on this. He never did claim that in any part of
no,
this book. So I'm not going. So saying that and understanding that this is a biased source. He is an accurate source, but he's a biased source.
yeah,
And I also have to say that he really like fucking kisses Pat Contry's ass in this book.
yeah. We'll have to talk about Pat in a little bit because we're also
I
gonna talk a
don't
little bit about
dislike
the
Pat. I don't dislike Pat, but at the same time, he's like the way that Mike writes about Pat is it's like he thinks
yeah.
sunshine like rainbows shine out his ass or some shit.
Yeah, well, you have to remember that at the time, Pat was one of the lead guys talking about this, and Pat was absolutely dead on talking about the Coleco Chameleon and the retro VGS. Everything he had to say was, as far as I'm concerned, like Pat was dead on the money. Now Pat is wrong about other things.
Yes.
And we'll get to that because we got another topic I'm going to bring up at the end of the show. But yeah, well, what I was also going to say is that you have to remember that Mike James was also a very close friend of SoCal Mike Kennedy.
Yes.
So he's essentially writing about his friend, and this soul who kind of lost his way. And you can pick up on it through the words in the book that, it's like, I wish this guy was still my friend, and
We were the Three
you know,
Musketeers, and
yeah, be the Three Musketeers again. And it's like, how do you even like, is he ever going to ever own up to what he did? And that's really the only way that there could be any redemption for Mike Kennedy is if he just basically came clean about what happened. And I just don't see that happening. So it kind of ends on a sad note.
it's true, and it's because at the same time, and like what goes through all the deals that Mike Kennedy did like the chase the chuck wagon stuff,
Hmm.
where like Mike James outlines Mike Kennedy as a guy who, if he ever touches success, it's completely accidental and in spite of himself, not because of himself. And
Yeah.
it's more because of the people he surrounds himself with that he gets success. And he paints a
I'd say the
really bad picture of Mike Kennedy's wife.
Yeah. Well, really quick, I'd say the podcast is the closest thing he ever came to success. I mean, he came off of another show, and that show kind of fizzled out because the guy who was running it was a flake, and he was basically the impetus to Retro Gaming Roundup becoming a thing. And the show is still going on without him now,
Yes.
and it's a really good show. I actually advise people to listen to it. I haven't listened to it in months because I just haven't had the time, but it's like a great show. But yeah, um, yeah, his wife. Actually, I'm not sure what to think of his wife because it's like, is she? Because you get the impression that Mike James thinks that Mike Kennedy isn't being really forthcoming with everything with his own wife. Like, how much does she actually know about like the SNES inside of a Jaguar shell and stuff like that?
The way that Mike James paints what's her name, Trish,
Yeah, Trish.
is that she doesn't care about the details. All she cares about is her level of comfort and
Okay, yeah, I can agree with
her
that.
and level of attention that Mike Kennedy pays to her.
Hmm.
If either of those are in jeopardy, she has a conniption fit, and Mike just sort of goes okay and bends to her will.
Yeah.
Because I remember this part about how the other two hosts were like, if we make a commitment to record at this time, we can record at this time. If anything else pops up afterwards, that's later, because this is the first commitment. And always Mike Kennedy was like, well, Trish said this, and Trish wanted me to go to watch a dog show or something.
Oh yeah, I remember that. There's a chapter named for that. the name of the chapter. It was something had a funny chapter name. I don't remember what it is right now.
Yeah. So I just get this picture that Trish is this very vapid woman who, like I said, who prioritizes getting attention from her husband more than anything else, and if she doesn't get it, she has a fit. That's
Right.
how Mike James is painting Trish Kennedy.
Yeah. Now the format of the book is really interesting because you can basically just cut it into thirds, and the first third is basically just building up Mike Kennedy as this great guy that they all knew, and it was just like, yeah, it was we were the three musketeers. We came off of this really terrible podcast, or like, actually, Mike James wasn't on that podcast, but Scott and Mike Kennedy were, and Mike Kennedy got Retro Gaming Roundup going. They brought in Mike James. They like made this 7 to 8 hour podcast every month that comes out, and it was just like the best of times. And then came the Retro VGS, and like the whole middle of the book is about him like trying to get this stupid console going, even though there's no prototype, and he's trying to you know, trying to get past Kickstarter's terms and conditions with the name of the book, Smoke and Mirrors, and then the whole last half of the book is just like the downfall. That's kind of an interesting part because there's a while in the book where Mike Kennedy actually disappears,
Yes.
and it just becomes about the Coleco company, and how much of a bunch of shitbags they are. Because the Coleco company that exists now is Coleco Holdings. Yeah,
Yes.
it's not the original, Connecticut leather
Well,
company. It's
let's rewind a little because you did skip over one part in the middle that was very important
yeah.
about the book, and that's of course the retro magazine, which was a
Oh
big component
yes.
of the book about how Mike Kennedy had this vision of a somewhat regularly scheduled magazine that detailed all of the goings on in the retro video game scene, and he got all these big names to write articles, including Sean Baby and
Jeremy Parrish and
yeah,
Pat and
yes,
Chris Kohler.
yeah, and detailed about how Pat was getting paid with $200 an article, and then he found out that Sean Baby was getting $800 an article.
That's kind of shocking because when I think of Sean Baby, I haven't heard of Sean Baby in a long time.
Yeah,
Like he's kind of fallen off.
last major thing I heard about him was he accepted Yule Bull's boxing challenge.
Yeah, that's really the last time he was relevant.
And then Yule Bull found that Sean Baby was 6'4", 240 pounds kickboxer.
Hmm.
And he's like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. but
Oh, that guy.
but yeah, the book is very good. It's very informative, and the retro magazine stuff I found extremely interesting because Mike just would not stop messing with it.
Hmm.
Because it sounded like when they got the first issues done, they had a winning formula. He had all the right writers, he had all the right editors in place, he had the right graphic designers, he had people that the graphic designers he had ties to the print industry and new printers that gave them good deals and shit. But Mike had like an ego trip. Is like I had to be in charge of this, so he fucked with the guy who had all of the layout files. He fucked with the writers. He fucked with the editors. And
He fucked with the guy who came up with the idea for the magazine because it wasn't
yeah,
even his.
yeah.
It
And
was some other guy.
and the funny thing about this, I can't say for sure if Retro Magazine could run ongoing the way it was originally structured
I don't think
forever.
so.
I think they could have
No.
had like a 2 to 5 year run, successful run of
Yeah.
continual issues, but then they'd have to shut down. But I think 5 years for a retro magazine would have been respectable. But they had like 2 years of spotty running, according to the book, if that.
Yeah.
And I think that what that illustrated to me, like I said, is Mike Kennedy's inability to just let stuff run when he has the right people in charge. And
Right.
it's because, like I said, if the original team that he had he was just hands off and all he did was sign checks, that would have run, like I said, 2 to 5 years easily.
Yeah. And it actually there's nothing wrong with like wanting to keep your keep your magazine or anything that you create fresh. But I've heard people describe what it's like to work with Mike Kennedy, and the term shifting sand is often used.
Yes.
It happened with the magazine, and it happened with the console. Like every time, they'd get toward an idea of what they want the console to be, he would like throw in another idea. He's like, "Oh, the console should do this too," and they're like, "Oh my God, now we got to like go back to the drawing board."
Yeah, and the other problem with that is as you said, Retro Magazine was supposed to be a retro magazine, but I remember one of the editors detailed how Mike's like, "Oh, we need to have this on the front cover," and it was like a very very new video game character, not retro at all, and they're like,
Probably something like Shovel Knight,
"Yeah, well,
and I can understand
Shovel,
that.
no, it wasn't Shovel Knight. It was something really
Well,
new."
I was just saying, for example.
Yeah, but it was something that would even fit with uh, the retro theme, which was what was
Hmm.
really weird about it. And anyways, you know that this goes into the retro VGS where they were making plans about it. And they actually had a really respectable engineer working on, at least not working on it because the guy that I'm thinking of, the guy who actually went and did the engineering for the analog, he never did
Kevtris.
what?
Kevtris?
Yeah, he never did more than just do some whiteboarding. He never did
Hmm.
any engineering. He never wrote down specs. He never did any plotting of circuit boards. Mike Kennedy asked him 5 questions, and he said, "Well, if you want to do this, you have to have X, Y, and Z, and only X, Y, and Z." That's all he did. That was his contribution, and he also offered to sell cores, like FPGA cores,
Right.
to Mike Kennedy, saying, "Well, I have these cores written for these systems, these classic systems. I will license them to you for a really cheap price beneath what I will license to anyone else." And Mike Kennedy's like, "Oh, we'll write our own core." That's all of his contribution. He didn't do anything else.
It's insane.
And what's really funny is reading it. It reminds me of what it was like because before the analog came out, you know, the FPGA path for emulation was treated as like, that sounds good on paper, but will it really work? I'd rather have like an x86 computer with like an emulator in there that dumps the cartridge when you plug it in,
Yeah.
which is what all the other retro machines did back then.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't until the analog that the FPGA route became viable because Kevtris, what he did was magic.
Yeah. He made a machine from scratch with existing modern parts that basically recreates the original Nintendo.
Yes,
I mean, it's cycle perfect.
yes, and they did it 3 more times.
Hmm.
And well, he always had like the cores. He had the core for the NES. He had an SNES FPGA core, and he had a
Sega Genesis.
yes FPGA core, and I think a Master System FPGA core as well.
Well, I
Uh,
think, well, actually, the Master System might not be exactly like the Genesis, but I think if you have a Genesis core, it's also going to be a Master System, just because one
it's
is like literally built right off the other.
yes, but point remains is nobody else had competing FPGA cores coded at that time,
Hmm.
and he graciously offered a good licensing deal. He's like, here, I'm offering an insane licensing deal, and Mike's like, no, we'll just buy another one. And
Yeah,
that's
that's what I said was so insane is that like this is the guy that you should hire because he's giving you something on a silver platter that you need, and you just turn him away. It's maybe the dumbest thing he ever did in the whole venture.
yeah. And the other thing I want to add is what they wanted to have done. What Mike was suggesting was a singular system where you could have what was it, like a adapter slot for the cartridge slot and plug
Yeah,
in any cartridge from any retro game system, and the FPGA would automatically know and switch.
that's
Um,
a good word. Automagically.
um, Kevtris never was able to promise that for a good reason because
Yeah.
FPGAs are extremely amazing in what they can do,
Hmm.
but to make an FPGA completely change its core on the fly repeatedly is not a good idea. The only way you could conceivably do that with a singular circuit board is literally having multiple FPGAs on the board.
Yeah. Because the chips are basically, as the name implies, it's just like a series of gates that can open and close inside of a chip, and you probably just don't want it to be constantly doing that, I would imagine.
Yes.
Oh my god. So I can't believe how long this thing went on, just him trying to get this console off the ground.
And the other thing I want to add is it talked a lot about the guy who did the Retro Labs coffee table kitchen table.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Retro Labs kitchen table.
Yeah, that's actually the one I know the least about. I've seen the video, but like I didn't. There were a lot of people who were able to examine that video and make a lot of like technical assessments about it, but I'm just like, yeah, I don't know what I'm looking at.
It's so there were 3 faked prototypes,
Yeah.
and the 3 faked prototypes are, of course, the
kitchen table
the
one.
kitchen table where you just have this guy in a weird suit filming on what looks like a potato. The video quality's that bad.
Yeah.
And and he's like, and he has like all this junk from his garage, like a voltometer and an old tube
I think that's
TV.
why, because like all I saw in that video was just like a pile of junk. I'm like, what am I even looking at?
Yeah. And something's plugged into the TV somewhere, showing on the screen. So, that's how you make consoles, I guess.
Yeah.
And like even at that point, people could give Mike Kennedy the benefit of the doubt. I was like, okay, this fucking guy in the button-up shirt with the kitchen table is just taking him for a ride.
Right.
And people did give him the benefit of the doubt at first because like, so Mike does what Mike did, and he threw that guy under the fucking bus, and then hired the mysterious Mr. Lee.
Should have called him Mr. E.
Yeah. And that's
the most surprising part of the whole. I'll let you finish in a second, but the most surprising part of the whole ordeal was that Mr. Lee actually existed. People have talked to him. Because I thought he was fake. I'm like, there's no way there's a Mr. Lee, because this went on for like weeks.
Oh, Mr. Lee lasted longer than weeks because there was the video game conference where they had the Jaguar case.
Yeah, that's the most famous one, I think.
And people give Mike the benefit of the doubt there too because people talk about how Mike was warned, don't let anyone take pictures of the back of the gate of the console. And the first thing he did was he took pictures of the back of the console. If Mike knew, would he do that? Or would he be so cocky that he'd do it anyway?
You know what? I thought about that for a long time. I think Mike did know, just because there's so many other things that Mike did that don't make sense if he doesn't know if he isn't in on the con. So I think he did know. I think Mike just is the architect of his own destruction, and he constantly causes his own failure, all the time. So I can see him like just absentmindedly turning on a camera and being like, "Oh yeah, this is the back of the console. Oh shit," I could see him doing that. So I think he knew.
Fair enough. I just have to pose that question.
Plus, he had the cartridge, the what you call it, the
SD card, EverDrive.
Yeah, the EverDrive cartridge. That was just, it was the front shell of a Atari Jaguar cartridge with had to be clearly a Super Nintendo board taped onto the back, and then him just gingerly putting it into the cartridge slot. He knows what kind of cartridge that is.
Yes. And
he has to know that in order for that to plug in, it has to be a Super Nintendo connector. I don't know how you could be so stupid to think that you could make a uh, just a custom board and like Super Nintendo cartridges just work natively. I mean that's stupid. Plus, he was really trying hard to hide that. Like, if you see him plug in the cartridge, he's being very ginger and making sure that the back of the cartridge never faces the camera.
That's a good point. I just because people
Yeah,
just question that part of you know is he just playing dumb or is he really dumb? Sort of like the Maddox thing. um, that's a good point though. I think that definitely sheds light into it because even at that point, some people were willing to give Mike the benefit of the doubt of he's the one being taken for a ride. There's no way that he's that stupid.
yeah. I went back and forth on it for a long time, and I think he was I think he was in on the con. He knew.
Uh,
He knew what that thing was.
Now, one of my favorite parts about this is when they were going back and forth of where we're going to go Indiegogo or we're going to go Kickstarter. And I remember Mike was even protesting with Kickstarter when Kickstarter says, "Oh, we have a physical prototype policy," and Mike's like, "Well, this one didn't," and they're like, "That was 3 years ago. We changed our policy."
Yeah, yeah,
And obviously, the choice to go Indiegogo was born entirely of the fact that they wanted to get a rush of money. And I'll say this about Mike is I think he thought that if he was able to get $1 million, he would be able to actually build this thing. I think he still
yeah.
intended to build this thing.
Everybody thinks that. Yeah.
I never thought he wanted to take the money and run.
Yeah, he thought that he was just gonna like sneak a fake prototype past people to get money, and then he'd use that money to actually make the prototype.
Yes, and
And it just doesn't work that way.
no, it
And
doesn't.
that was doomed to fail anyway, because like use that money up to build a prototype. Now what?
Yeah.
You asked for money again?
Well, he did that with the magazine.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the funniest thing that came out of this whole thing was right at the height of this, some guy, Silver Mania, did this video called the Coleco Chameleon Prototype Unboxing.
Right.
And it is one of the greatest trolls I've ever seen in my life because this guy spent some fucking money. He got like this really nice, printed box that says Coleco Chameleon on there with all the correct branding and shit. He got a Jaguar case and had it branded Coleco Chameleon. And he got one of the controllers and made the Coleco Chameleon on it too. He had this whole thing set up to where it looks like a real Coleco Chameleon, whatever that means. And he acted like, oh, Mike Kennedy sent me the Coleco Chameleon. I'm going to unbox it and show you this is real. And he opens it up. It's an empty Jaguar case with a with a video capture card inside.
Yeah, we got to talk about the capture card.
and an SNES Mini underneath it.
Oh my god!
Do you remember this video, right?
I do remember this video. Yes.
And the best part is the background music for the video is a chiptune version of "Never Gonna Give You Up." Let's talk about the capture card.
Oh yeah. So the third prototype, the one that they used to basically, who were they trying to fool? Was it Indiegogo at this point?
It was Indiegogo at this point because
Okay.
it was also not just Indiegogo. It was also this was a challenge to the Atari Age forum because Atari Age were super snoops about this. And anytime Mike Kennedy posted anything on social media, they instantly analyzed the fuck out of it. This is how they were able to figure out, and what was it, like a day about the NES Mini.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was surprised how fast they got the capture card because I looked at that. I'm like, because it's inside of a clear case, but the case is also kind of smoky, so you can't really get a clear look at what it is. But you could tell that it's not actually a prototype board because, as they explain in the book, a blue PCB is kind of fancy for a prototype. It's not something that you would make for a prototype.
Yeah,
and I've seen other explanations like it had way too many capacitors, like in a big cluster in one spot for it to just be a video game system. It had to be like some sort of like video capture equipment or something. And that was one of the things that really got people on the right trail At least as far as I remember. I think in the book it explains it a bit differently, but I was actually reading the forums and somebody was talking about like what are all these capacitors doing here? This looks ridiculous. This is
Yeah,
not a video game system.
yeah. And the funny thing is, the first couple of hours after they posted like the video and the picture of the video capture card in the clear Jaguar case, um, there is some back and forth where Mike is laughing giddily, saying, "Oh, Atari is just trying to figure out what it is. They don't know what it is."
And then like somebody very easily got rid of the watermark because it wasn't even a very sophisticated watermark. It was literally just like it was just like a shade lighter than like the rest of the picture. So all they had to do was just like rebalance the lettering in the watermark and it disappeared.
Yeah,
And then like they're like, okay, we got like a semi-clear look at what this board is.
yep.
Let's do some Google image searches.
Well, what they did was they figured out that the main chip was specifically for video processing.
Yeah, yeah,
And after they figured that out, that narrowed their scope down entirely. And then they're like, "Oh, these memory chips on here were only used in these years." And then they were able to like say what you will about Atari Age, they sort of almost as
yeah.
impressive as 4chan hunting down Shia LaBeouf's flag.
Yes. I mean, yeah, it was really just amazing how fast they got it. I don't remember how fast, if it was like the same day or it wasn't more than a week. I know that. It may have been like a couple days, but
And
they found it pretty quick.
it blew up big because Mike basically went into super duper damage control mode, and he
Yeah,
tried to put everything on Mr. Lee, and that obviously didn't work. Now the funniest part about this is one of the first engineers, legitimate engineers that was working on the retro VGS before the Coleco Chameleon, um, got so pissed at Mike when Mike says, "Oh, good news! I got the Jaguar molds."
half the
Because
job is done.
and no, the reason why I was pissed was that meant they were stuck with a very limited size and shape for the
Exactly. Yes.
board. And I'm not going to pretend like they were going to make a board the size of a dinner table
Yeah.
to make this work. But in the first generation of any console, the first board is huge.
Right.
Um, and the best way to look at this is open up a fucking NES, original top loader NES, and look at the size of that fucking board.
Yeah.
And then open up an NES top loader. And look,
Yeah. They. Although to be fair, like our NES is actually bigger than the original Famicom. The Famicom board is closer in size to the
top loader.
to the to the top loader. I think what a lot of that space was like having that stupid spring loaded mechanism in there.
All right, fair enough. But in other systems, like
Yeah.
the SNES is a great example of this because the
Yeah.
SNES board and the SNES mini board are completely
Yeah.
different sizes.
Yeah, that's definitely the case.
But my point is, any first generation board versus second generation board, the first generation board is almost always bigger
Hmm.
because the engineers are just trying to make sure it works. And they need to have room to move around and shit. Like another great example of this is the Commodore PET.
Right.
Like the original Commodore PET board takes up most of the base of the unit, and there's reproduction PET mini boards that are the size of like a graphics card now, but it has all the same chips, all the same capacitors, just on a much smaller board. Because, like I said, the first generation board is always bigger.
Right.
And like I said, the first engineer that Mike says, "Oh, good news, we got the Jaguar molds." Now, I love where they got the Jaguar molds from. I love this part.
The dentist.
Yes, the Atari Jaguar failed. Some people would argue 64-bit system. That's invaded of itself.
That's that. It's got. I have to explain that because it's one of the biggest stretches of all time. It because it's basically six. It's basically four 16-bit processors clustered together. So they're like, well, 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16. That's 64. That would be like if the Sega Saturn with its two 32-bit processors tried to pass itself off as 64-bit.
Anyways, there's a dental uh, imaging company that had the Jaguar molds,
Yeah,
and they were using them for like this like dental imagery camera. Where I shit you not, they use the cartridge slot for something else too. Like if you went into a dentist's office in the late '90s, early aughts, you would see a fucking Atari Jaguar painted beige white
that's hilarious.
hanging sideways off the wall with a camera hanging off of it. And Mike Kennedy was like obsessed with this mold because he spent money to buy this fucking mold from this dental imagery company. And every step of the way, people were telling Mike, license the fucking mold. Make some fucking empty cases and sell them.
Right.
Do something with them.
Don't make a chameleon out of it. That's one of those things where that had to be one of those cases where he just kind of went off on his own and did that, and everyone tried to stop him, or like by the time they knew what he did, it was already too late.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I got the molds. What molds? What did you do?
What did you do? At least he didn't come back one day and say, "Oh, I got the 3DO molds."
Oh God. It's like, oh great, our system's gonna look like a VCR. Great.
That would have been an improvement.
It's like nice and boxy. There's lots of room in there.
Actually, that would have been better for the developers. But I digress. No, Mike did some really shady, shitty stuff with the molds because he transferred the molds from his video game company to like back to the magazine, and they made a third company. He's transferred it there,
Yeah.
and basically, one of the guys way back in the beginning that had a not controlling interest, but had a interest in Retro Magazine was like, well, then the molds are, then I hold a part of these molds
Exactly. Yeah.
because near the end, Mike was like playing playing shuffles with the fucking with all the properties that actually had any money. Like he was moving the Retro Magazine rights over to this shell company. He was making shells companies left and right. Now,
It's just so crazy going back and reading all this. It's like, holy shit, like all this shit happened.
yeah. At one point, there was 105% shares of Retro Magazine.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, this book is a ride, but it gets technical in the middle. But I like that sort of book.
Yeah.
Now, here is the big question that I think we should ask. Did Mr. Lee do what he was told, or was the deception a part of his idea too?
That I don't know.
Mm.
I think there's some collaboration in there, definitely. I don't know who was the architect of what. And I don't think we can know that because the only two people who would know the answer to that aren't going to speak.
Yes.
But
And
I would say both are guilty.
yes.
And there's no reason to assume that one was just a patsy. They're both equally at fault.
And Mike James does try to paint at least a sympathetic picture of Coleco Holdings at first.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they don't know what they are. They don't know what they have. They know they have a license for an old video game console. They don't know anything else. They don't know anything about hardware stuff. And they got tricked by this con man. And
Yeah, they definitely did. They got tricked, but they ended up being bastards too.
yeah, but Mike James tries to be really sympathetic with him at first, even with the whole thing about how they did the right thing once the capture card was revealed, where they publicly demanded Mike Kennedy turn over the prototype to be inspected by their engineers of their choice within a week.
It would have been hilarious because then their engineer would be like, yeah, this is a really good security system you got here in this video game box. Oh my God. Yeah, but like I said, there's a whole section of the book that's just about them, and Mike disappears.
Yeah.
And they do some shit of their own. Like the really shady one, I had to go back and read this a couple times because I was like, wait, did they actually do this? What they did was that they went to Ben Heck and tried to shake him down for like money and a license. Actually, they like charged him $1 for a license, which was just enough where it was like Ben was like, "That's not even worth fighting. I might as well just do it. I'll sign whatever I need to sign and send them the dollar." And he's not even sure if he actually did that. And then what they did was, in order to get the trademark for the ColecoVision, you actually have to have a product. Otherwise, there's no point in having a trademark.
Yes.
So they used his ColecoVision Portable to say that, well, look, we licensed this product to be made, so we need a trademark. And I'm like,
Wow.
that is the scummiest thing. Holy shit. And they even got they even got the logo from Ben, because Coleco Holdings, they didn't have any assets like that. All they had was like the name that they bought.
Yes.
So Ben just sent them his own custom version of their old ColecoVision logo and said, "Okay, here you go." And that's how they got it.
That's awful.
It is awful. It really does not paint a good picture of them at all.
But again,
Oh,
like I said, Mike James tries to be really fair with them at first and tries to because there is a bias there, but at the end he's like, okay, I can't keep defending Coleco Holdings because they are
no.
assholes.
Yeah.
Um, and it's sort of like where we are now at the end of the book. Sort of tries to paint this picture of Mike Kennedy is completely ostracized by the gaming industry. Everyone he's ever screwed has gone on and done better things by themselves or with other people.
Hmm.
And he talks about how great Pat Contry is and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I don't dislike Pat Contry at all. I want to make that clear to the people listening. I think he's a
Yeah.
fine fellow. I just think that Ian's a little fucking edgelord turbo turd.
Well, let's kind of transition into something, because there's another questionable console coming out, which is called the Intellivision Amico,
Oh Jesus!
which looks like a complete flaming turd. And I don't really watch Pat Contry that often, just because he's kind of hit or miss. I have been listening to him a bit more since the Amico drama has started, just because I see a lot of parallels with the Coleco Chameleon.
Yes,
And there's some good things that he said, but there's also some bad things, just because okay, so what happened was uh there was a recent revelation. Like, there was some sort of document that was hidden in some, I don't understand exactly what happened, but there was some document that somebody found, I believe on the Intellivision website, and Ars Technica reported about it, and Tommy Tallarico, the CEO of Intellivision, threw a big hissy fit and threatened lawsuits and all that. And what Pat said was that, like, "Oh, you're going after journalists now. Well, we're a fraternity and we look out for each other. And if you go after one of us, we're all going to come after you." I'm like, "Pat, maybe you shouldn't say that, because that's kind of what the whole, well, that's part of what Gamergate was all about. Is like, how all the how, like, all the journalists from, like, IGN and Ars Technica and Rock Paper Shotgun all know each other and look out for each other, and like, and network, and how they can basically control a narrative if they want to. That's not a good thing. That you shouldn't be saying something like that. But otherwise, yeah, the coverage on this thing is just a complete disaster. Well, actually, not. It's not the coverage that's a disaster. I really do think that this console is not. It's not really. It's not long for this world. I don't think it's. I don't think it's quite the. I don't think it's quite the flaming turd that everyone thinks it is. Like, there's a talk about how, like, the controls are laggy, but people have played it. Like, nobody's really complained about it. There was a big show. Stuttering Craig was there. He tried out the console. He said it was fine. There's also some big hullabaloo about those stock photos that they use. They photoshopped in Amico controllers in people's hands, and somebody discovered that it was Shutterstock. They used Shutterstock photos and just station controllers and put it in Amico, and that's not really a big deal. Like, other game companies have done that in the past in the exact same way, so I don't really see why that's a problem. But I think what's what's wrong with the Amico is just like I don't know who this is for, and I don't know what problem it's solving because I don't think anyone really was clamoring for the return of the Intellivision and these controllers. I don't know, like, why do we need these? Like, why do we need a touch screen? Why do we need a device like this where like most of the software that's coming out about on it is like available already on phone apps, and like it just doesn't seem like it's filling a niche. It I think it's gonna like come out and just kind of die.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
Because if anything, this is what I imagine with the Amico is because if you look at the original television, they had those big giant dial controllers that look like a cross between a phone and a
yeah.
whatever the fuck that is. Um,
Yeah,
and
well, when you say dial, you don't mean like the dials that used to be on like game systems. You're talking about like the number pad.
I talk about like it looks like a phone, but it
Yeah,
has a giant fucking wheel at the bottom too.
yeah. Well, that wheel is just like it's kind of like a D-pad except it's just a circle. It doesn't spin or anything. You'd like it's one of the worst game pads ever.
Well, the Amiga looks like they're like, okay, let's try to do that. But
Yeah,
well, what else is popular? Well, the Switch is popular. Let's try to do a Switch as well.
yeah.
And
And I think they're looking at the Switch. They're like, well, the Switch is underpowered, so we can be underpowered and like and ask for like $250 per unit. And I'm like, yeah, but the Switch is a little different.
Switch has Nintendo backing it. If the
Yeah,
Nintendo Switch was engineered exactly the way it was, but with another company's name and branding and software library behind it, it would fail.
yeah, yeah. Nintendo's got the software, and I think there's a lot more to Switch because it's not just it's not just a game machine with a gimmick. It's not just a low powered PC that like the or like a low powered Android device like the Amico is. It is like a system that fills a niche that people want.
Yes.
It's a very compact video game system with a good library, like with
Yes.
games that are easy to take care of.
But without the Nintendo name and without the library,
Yeah,
if you have the exact same hardware, it would fail.
yeah. Whereas the Amico, oh, I should have brought up the 10 commandments of the Amico. I don't have it up. But a lot of it's like, well, the games have to be rated E. They have to be under $10. They have to use the controller, which I don't know. I'm going to take them out of context just to be funny, but it's kind of like saying, well, if you're going to make a game for the PlayStation 4, it has to use the PlayStation 4 controller. Oh, that's not what they mean. What they're actually saying, I think, is that it has to use the gimmicks on the controller, which
Yes.
is trying to put the cart ahead of the horse, or trying to justify the existence of the controller
Well,
rather than like saying, here's our innovative controller, don't you want to make things for this. It's opening up so many avenues of like creativity, like the N64 analog stick did, except it's not like that at all.
the funny thing to me about that whole thing with the whole controller is, and you have to use all the gimmicks of the controller is, imagine if Nintendo did that with the Famicom,
Yeah,
and they told every third party, developer
you got
that,
to use that microphone.
yes, that's exactly where I was fucking going with that.
Yeah,
Imagine,
actually, they did kind of do that with the Wii. I don't know if they really mandated it, but there was a while on the Wii. This is my biggest problem with the Wii is that like there's so many games that just like gimmickily use the waggle, where like there were so many games where to do something you had to shake the controller, and I hated it. And I'm glad that died after a few years.
oh, you have to use motion control to aim the fucking arrows in Zelda.
Yeah. Well, that's a little more that's acceptable. I understand that.
Ah,
Because use aiming the arrows with the C stick is not as much fun. That may be the one advantage that the Wii version of Twilight Princess had over the GameCube version. But I'm just talking about like, well, you in order to swing the sword, you gotta swing the stupid controller. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to press a button. And like the one where I like nearly had a conniption fit was like I was at my sister's house and we are playing like new Super Mario Brothers, which I fucking hate. I do not like the new Super Mario Brothers games. And I'm trying to pick something up. I'm like, how do I pick? I think yeah, in order to pick up another player, you have to like shake the controller when you press the B button.
Yes.
And the kids explained this to me, and I was like, why can't that just be a button?
And then your sister comes in and says, "Careful, Uncle Neil's gonna start cursing again. He's
Like,
gonna,
you need a timeout.
he's gonna start saying, Bell, back in my day, we had 2 buttons on the controller and we liked it."
Yeah. It's all we needed. Or I think the other one that where I nearly just lost it was like, I'm like, yeah, I don't really like the Wii controller, the nunchuck and Wiimote combo. I just want a regular controller. And I swear to God, one of my friends took the Wiimote controller, turned it sideways, and put it back in my hands. And they go, well, there you go. There, now it's a regular controller. And for a split second, I had a hot flash and this delicious vision of my arm, like elbow deep into the person's face, and my fist sticking out the back of their skull. And then I came back to reality. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, I want something like the GameCube controller or the Xbox controller. I don't want this stupid nunchuck.
Oh, thanks, your hand turns it sideways. There you go. Isn't that better?
Yeah, that's what you wanted. No, that's not what I meant. I did not like the Wii. I mean, there's good software on it. Certainly some games on there that I wanted to play that I never got around to. But I don't like that interface. I don't want to shake the controller on every fucking game. But yeah, to summarize, I think that the Amico, I don't think there's an audience for it. I think that's the number one problem. I don't really care about anything else except maybe the price.
What
I think the price hurt. Yeah, the gimmicky shells that we're gonna have like all sorts of goofy colors. That's a Mike Kennedy thing. They did that with the retro VGS as well. It's
so has anyone confirmed or denied that Mike Kennedy's working in television?
No, because as far as I know, well, they do have an actual unit. So if Mike Kennedy was there, they wouldn't be that far.
Well, if they had Mike Kennedy there, they'd have an absolute unit.
If Mike Kennedy was there, they'd have like a new feature every single week. It's like, oh yeah, well we thought of a new feature we could add, and like the engineers like, God damn it.
He's no Peter Molyneux. Let's be fair.
Yeah, but I do think there is like a little bit of Mike Kennedy in the Amico, because a lot of the selling points are, wouldn't it be great if?
Yes.
Which is exactly what Mike Kennedy used to do, how he used to pitch everything. It's like imagine a new side scroller in the 8-bit style. Imagine if we had a whole system that allowed nothing but games like that. Wouldn't that be great? And then you're like, yeah, that would be great. Wait a minute. That would that would completely fail, because even though that's the sort of system that I would want, I know that there would be no support for it, and thus there'd be no point in actually buying something like that.
Every game's a cartridge, Neil. And if they're all cartridges, they'll all be perfect. There will be no bugs.
Yeah, right, because there were never bugs on the NES. Except all of them.
Yes.
Yeah, no, there's no DLC. Oh, that's another one of the Amico 10 commandments.
Jesus.
Is that like no games can have I understand no in-app purchases, because that's kind of like
that's
dumb.
Scummy.
Yeah, but like no DLC, it's like, well, what if the game's like permanently broken? It's like some games were shipped like that back in the day, where there's games that you can't even finish.
Yes.
And it's actually pretty handy to be able to download a patch really easily.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know who this is for. I don't know what problem this solves. I don't know if people are actually going to buy this thing. I think people are going to look ahead in the future and be like, how long am I actually going to be playing this thing? I might buy it for like Breakout and Pong, but for that price point, I don't think I'll be playing it for that long, so maybe I'll give it a pass. And you could probably get Pong and Breakout in some sort of like Steam collection, and you could probably buy a USB rotary controller to go along with it. I mean, it seems like a lot of the stuff that is done on this thing is also done on other platforms anyway. So it's like, if you want like touchscreen games, you can use your phone. If you want like other gimmicky type games, there are peripherals that you can buy, online. I don't know why we need this. So we'll
Yeah.
see. But anyway, we should get out of here.
Yes.
I don't know if we'll record an after show or not. I definitely will. Ben, you can stick around and we can just shoot the shit.
Let's shoot the shit. But
Okay, so
I'll just
we're gonna sign off. We're gonna sign off right now, and then for the Patreon folks, we're gonna come right back, just like the old days on Animation Aficionados, when the show would end, and then we would just keep talking.
Yes.
Wasn't that great?
Yes, it was.
Imagine more podcasts like that.
Yeah, 7 hours.
So anyway, this has been Neil. It's been Ben over there. Why don't you give a quick plug for yourself, Ben?
All right, Ben. Ben's my name. I do webcomic, but this is nightcomic.com. I do another podcast, Comic Connoisseurs, comicconnoisseurs.com, where I talk with Red and JT about comics, and we make fun of JT relentlessly. He says Munster in Sumerai.
In Mario.
Yes.
All right, and this has been Neil for the Gaming Hipster. It's a Patreon supported show. For $2 a month, you can go to patreon.com/Mr. Neil, and you can get all of the movie commentaries and other neat things that I put behind a paywall. And remember, it's just $2 a month. You could pay $2 once and get everything, or you can stick around and keep getting more stuff. And there's always stuff coming. There's the YouTube channel, which is linked on the Patreon somewhere. I don't remember the URL offhand. It's not my name, unfortunately, because I don't think YouTube lets me use my name until I get a certain number of subscribers. I don't know why I'm telling you this. But anyway, we're going to get out of here. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next month. Oh, and you can also find the podcast on geekcastradio.com, where the vanilla version of the show is hosted, and you can also listen to it on Spotify. And we are out. Produced at DOS HQ.